When a homeless boy yelled, "Don't eat," no one could have predicted what would unfold next. The Park Cafe, a place known for attracting the city's elite, sat nestled between rows of neatly trimmed trees and the soft hum of a nearby fountain. It was midday, and the cafe buzzed with life. Waiters in crisp uniforms weaving gracefully between tables, balancing trays of fresh dishes and hot coffee. The scent of warm bread mingled with the faint sweetness of blooming flowers. Yet, for one man, none of this seemed out of the ordinary. At a prime table in the center of the cafe sat Bernard Green, a name synonymous with wealth and power. He'd built his empire from the ground up, starting with real estate in his 20s and expanding into ventures few could even imagine. At 72, he carried himself with the assuredness of someone who didn't just own his world, but perhaps the world of everyone around him. His sharp suit and gold-rimmed glasses reflected his life of luxury, yet as he glanced at the menu, his movements were slow, almost uncertain. Across from him sat Marissa, his much younger wife. She could have stepped straight off a magazine cover, jet black hair framing a face that seemed too perfect, bright red lipstick carefully applied, every inch of her radiating elegance. But her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She absently twirled a diamond bracelet on her wrist, her attention not on her husband, but focused on her phone. Just beyond the patio fence, a boy lingered. Small for his age, his oversized hoodie hanging loosely on his thin frame, he scanned the tables and pockets, looking for an opportunity. His name was Malik, though no one in the cafe knew him. He was a kid with nowhere to go, always on the fringes of conversation, never quite part of the world around him. Bernard glanced at his watch. "You're distracted again," he remarked calmly, but with a pointed edge to his voice. Marissa looked up and offered a smile, though there was no warmth in it. "I'm right here," she replied sweetly, reaching across the table to place her hand on his. "You know how much I enjoy these lunches." Malik's stomach growled, urging him closer. His footsteps were almost silent as he leaned against the patio railing. His eyes landed on Bernard's table, a pristine white bowl of soup, fresh bread, and sparkling water, meals he'd only dreamed of in recent months. Then something odd happened. As Bernard adjusted his glasses and picked up his phone, Marissa's hand slipped into her designer handbag. Malik's eyes widened as he saw her fingers close around a small vial. She twisted it open with a casual flick and tilted her hand ever so slightly over the soup. The liquid blended instantly, disappearing as if it had never been there. Malik's breath caught. He froze. He saw her stir the soup with a spoon, her expression unchanged, before leaning closer to Bernard. "After everything I've done, you won't ruin this now," she whispered. Malik blinked, his mind racing. Was this real? Could a woman who looked so perfect, in a place so polished, really be doing what he thought? But he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was terribly wrong. His heart pounded as he crouched lower behind the railing, unsure of what he had just witnessed. No one else seemed to notice, no one else seemed to care. His stomach growled again, pulling him back to reality. But his eyes never left the couple. Bernard, distracted, checked his phone as his spoon hovered over the soup. Marissa was all charm again, smiling brightly, her hand resting under her chin, pretending everything was normal. But Malik knew the truth, and the weight of it pressed down on him. Instinct screamed at him to walk away, to stay out of it. Who would believe a boy like him? But he couldn't ignore what he had seen. He knew wrong when he saw it. With his chest tight, Malik stepped forward. "Don't eat that," he shouted, his voice cracking. Heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. The clatter of a dropped fork echoed through the cafe. Bernard froze, his spoon inches from his lips, staring wide-eyed at the boy. Marissa whipped around, her expression hardening. "What did you just say?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut. Malik didn't hesitate. "She put something in your food. I saw her. Don't eat it." Gasps rippled through the cafe. Silence followed, suffocating. Malik stood his ground, his chest heaving as adrenaline surged through him. Bernard glanced between the boy and his wife. "What is he talking about?" Marissa's voice was calm, though her hand trembled slightly. "He's just a liar,"
she spat.
Look at him. He probably just wants money or food. Malik didn't back down. He stepped closer, fists clenched. I'm not lying, he said firmly. She doesn't want you to know, but I saw everything. The air around the table thickened. All eyes were locked on the unfolding drama. Bernard leaned back slightly, his gaze narrowing. Marissa, what's going on? He asked, his voice steady. Marissa scoffed. He's just trying to cause trouble. She turned to the crowd. Why would you trust him over me? The murmurs grew louder. Was it true? Could she have really done it? But her fury snapped, and she slammed her hands onto the table. Enough. Bernard, eat your damn soup and let's go, she hissed, voice trembling with rage. Malik didn't budge. If you won't believe me, call someone to test it. You're rich. You have doctors, lawyers, people who can figure it out.
But don't eat it.
His voice rose in urgency. You'll regret it. Bernard's jaw tightened, and he looked at his wife with a newfound wariness. You've been acting strange for weeks now, he said softly. Marissa's face flushed. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered, but Bernard interrupted her sharply. Poison, he asked, his voice steely. The room gasped in unison, and the whispers rose. Marissa's carefully constructed facade faltered, her eyes darting toward the soup. For a moment, she looked cornered. Then she rounded on Malik. You've been spying on us, haven't you? Trying to cause trouble because you're jealous of people who actually have something. The words stung, but Malik stood tall. I'm not jealous. I saw what I saw, and I couldn't just let you hurt him. The sirens grew louder, and soon 2 police officers entered. The room fell still. What's going on here? One officer asked, his tone neutral but authoritative. Bernard stood, his towering frame still commanding attention. Officers, I need you to look at this, he said, pointing to the soup. This boy says my wife poisoned it. One officer leaned down, sniffing the bowl, then turned to Marissa. Ma'am, do you have anything to say about this? This is ridiculous, she cried. He's just a street kid trying to stir up troubles. But the officer wasn't buying it. We need to test the contents, he said, reaching for the bowl. No. Marissa snapped, her voice rising in panic. This is a misunderstanding, Bernard. You can't be serious. Ma'am, the officer said, narrowing his eyes. Is there something you'd like to tell us? Marissa hesitated, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She glanced at Bernard, then at the officers, her hands trembling. Finally, she spoke, her voice dripping with venom. I'm tired of living in his shadow, tired of his control over everything. He was never supposed to make it past this year, and She stopped abruptly, realizing she had said too much. The cafe erupted in gasps, and patrons began recording the scene. Bernard's face drained of color as the weight of her confession hit him like a punch to the gut. The officer stepped forward. Ma'am, I'm placing you under arrest for attempted murder. Please put your hands where I can see them. Marissa screamed, trying to wriggle free, but they secured her hands behind her back. You don't understand. I deserved everything, she shouted as they led her away, her voice echoing through the stunned cafe. Bernard sank back into his chair, trembling. For a moment he said nothing. His face showed disbelief and betrayal. Then his gaze landed on Malik, and something softened in his expression. The boy hadn't just saved his life. He had revealed a truth Bernard never saw coming. The cafe slowly returned to its hum of whispers. As the officers escorted Marissa out, some patrons exchanged wide-eyed glances. Others looked at Bernard with pity. Malik stayed rooted to the spot, unsure if he should leave or stay. Bernard turned to him, his voice softer now. Malik, he said, gesturing to the seat across from him, sit. Malik hesitated, but then slowly sank into the chair. You saved my life, Bernard said quietly, voice firm. I don't know how I can ever repay you. I couldn't let it happen, Malik said softly, gripping the edge of the table. Bernard nodded. Most people would have turned the other way. Pretended they didn't see. But you didn't. That took courage. Malik shrugged. I just don't like seeing people get hurt. That's all. Bernard studied him for a moment. How long have you been out here? The question caught Malik off guard, but he looked away, embarrassed. Bernard didn't press, instead pulling out a sleek black phone from his pocket. "Wait here," he said, standing to make a call. Malik's heart raced. Was he in trouble now? When Bernard returned, he was calm.
"Help's on the way," he said.
"I called someone I trust. They'll make sure you have a place to sleep tonight." "Safe." Malik's eyes widened. "You don't have to do that." "I know," Bernard replied, a faint smile. "That's why I want to help. You did something most people wouldn't have. And if the world had more people like you, it'd be a better place." For the first time in a long while, Malik felt a warmth he couldn't explain. He looked down, unsure of what to say. The patrons began to disperse, but the weight of what had just happened lingered. Bernard took a long sip of water before speaking again. "Sometimes life gives us the chance to change someone else's story. You changed mine today, Malik. Maybe, just maybe, I can help change yours." Malik looked up, his dark eyes glistening with something he hadn't felt in years. Hope.